Okay, I think we're ready to start. So we'll have more people coming in as we go along. But yeah, again, once again, thank you very much for joining the webinar. We're very glad to have all of you participating. Just one important piece of information before we start: the webinar is recorded, just so you know. But also, this means that it will be available on the SCORE's YouTube channel in the next day. So if you want to watch it again. So my name is Maeva Volz from Euronovia, and we are the partner responsible for the communication and dissemination activities of the SCORE project, which I will briefly introduce in a minute. So this first webinar it's the first in a series. So we will have one SCORE webinar every 2 months. So you can already know that the next one will be at the end of January. It will be about co-creation. But for this first one, it is co-organized so with Luís from ENT and Rochelle from Erin. And today our aim is to discuss the potential of ecosystem-based approach for coastal cities. So here's our agenda for this morning. Here. So the first, we have two speakers. The first one will be Luís, who will talk about the approach to ecosystem-based adaptation. So he will explain the concept of ecosystem approach adaptation, but also nature-based solution, and specifically how it is implemented within the SCORE project. And then our second speaker is an invited speaker, so Fokko from the EcoShape Foundation, who will talk about how eco-based adaptation is used, well, different projects implementing eco-based adaptation and the Building with Nature program as well. And our third item on the agenda will be a Q&A session. So for this, we invite you to write down your question in the Q&A tab that you have on the Teams platform. And you can write them down during the whole webinar, but we will answer them at the end of the webinar. Before we go further, I would just like to invite you to open the Slido page, so slido.com, and you can write down the numbers that you see here, the code that you see here, because we have prepared a couple of questions for you. So you can already open it now when we start with the very short questions after. Just as a very brief introduction, this webinar is organized in the framework of the SCORE project, and SCORE stands for Smart Control of the Climate Resilience in European Coastal Cities, and it is an EU-funded project under the Horizon 2020 program, which is led by the Atlantic Technological University in Sligo, Ireland. And the overall aim of the project is to develop a network of 10 coastal city living labs that will address water and climate-related hazards, so such as sea level rise, in order to improve the climate resilience of coastal cities through an ecosystem-based approach, which is exactly what we'll be talking about today, and smart technologies. And if you'd like to know more about the project, I really invite you to check out the website of the project. We also have all the social networks if you want to be kept up to date. And there is also a first webinar that was organized earlier this year that presents the overall project and the Coastal City Living Lab framework. So really, I invite you to check it out if you want to know more about the project itself. But now, so just before I give the floor to Luís, we just have a few questions for you. This is just to get to know you a little bit better and have some information. So here is our first question on Slido. So if you manage to go on the page, so you can still see the link to the Slido. Yeah, perfect. So I already see some of the countries. Yeah, it's just for us to know a little bit where you're all coming from and following this webinar from. Perfect. See, we have a lot of different countries here. Apparently, the Netherlands is very well represented. Right, in Slovenia as well. Well, it's very nice to have all of you with us, so you can, yeah, see that some people are still typing. Very well. Okay, great. So the Netherlands and Spain, I see, and Italy are very well represented, so welcome. And then we have a second question for you, which is a bit more related to the topic of today. So our question is, what is the first word that comes to your mind when you think about ecosystem-based adaptation and nature-based solution for climate change adaptation? So yeah, same, like you can write down the first word, the first two words that pop into your head, and we'll see, if we have different words in common. For this. Yeah, see that nature is resilience. That's very interesting. Okay, so we can see that we all have many different ideas, but they're all very interesting, and I think most of these topics will be discussed today with our two speakers. Okay, but resilience is definitely the keyword for most of you. Great. Well, thank you very much for participating. So just do not close the Slido page because we will have a few more questions for you at the end of this webinar. But for now, I will just give the floor to Luís. If you please go ahead.
Thank you, Maeva. I will just share my screen. Okay. So greetings to everyone. It is a real pleasure to be here today. My name is Luís Campos Rodrigues, and I'm an environmental consultant and researcher at ENT Environmental Management, which is one of the many partners of the SCORE project consortium. I have the honor of being here today on behalf of my colleagues from SCORE, and especially from Work Package 7, which focuses on the socioeconomic assessment of adaptation strategies and policy recommendations. So I must send a kind word to all of my colleagues from SCORE for their contributions. This talk will focus on ecosystem-based adaptation and its approach by the SCORE project. Our starting point is the consideration that we are dealing with coastal areas, which are significantly vulnerable to climate change impact in the form of sea level rise, flooding, erosion, among other effects. So adaptation is key for these areas, allowing to enhance resilience and reduce their vulnerability. So what do we understand by ecosystem adaptation, or in short, EBA? This type of adaptation strategy relies on nature-based solutions, either in green or blue forms of actions that focus on ecosystem restoration and enhancement of ecosystem services, protecting societies from climate change impact. As for categories and examples of EBA measures, we can start by urban green options such as green roofs, urban farming, parks, and green corridors. These measures often are associated with adaptation to hazards like heat waves or flooding, along with other co-benefits such as provision of food, support of recreation opportunities, carbon sequestration, among others. Another category is permeable surfaces, like the examples of retention ponds or rainwater gardens, which are often associated with the management of flooding as part of components of sustainable urban drainage systems. Moving on, wetlands is another category that's often linked with EBA solutions based on the restoration of different habitats ranging from wetland to salt marsh or estuaries. Measures for the category of river floodplains include river restoration, repair and reforestation, among others. And finally, as for the category of coastal shoreline integrates measures such as dune restoration, cliff stabilization, seagrass meadow restoration, and green dikes, to name some. And these measures are often associated also with adaptation to effects like coastal erosion, sea level rise, storm surge. Broadly speaking, in addition to EBA, other adaptation strategies include art-based measures, also known as grey infrastructure or engineering-based solutions that might include dikes, seawalls, water pipes, etc. And then soft solutions that are initiatives aimed at encouraging adaptive behavior, often involving non-material interventions like early warning systems or the creation of adaptation plans. Coming back to EBA, we also know that the EBA might be linked and connected with other strategies, but not only BA, but also art and soft. So we now refer to a fourth strategy here that's called hybrid adaptation strategy, meaning a combination of all or some of the previous three strategies. And it's important to mention here and to show it through a jigsaw puzzle that illustrates that often climate change problems require integrated solution involving these types of measures, right? So a straightforward example is the management of flooding in urban areas, because cities require, for example, a good sewage system, which is a art-based measure, but also the complement with a sustainable urban drainage system like retention ponds, rainwater gardens, or other types of permeable surfaces, but also a good flooding management plan. So that's a good example. Now, coming back to EBA, some key aspects worth referring include, for example, that EBA solutions provide a high number of measures that can address various hazards. Nonetheless, we also need to look at potential non-positive aspects that include, for example, or challenges that includes, for example, the potential inadequacy to deal with large-scale hazards and extreme events, thus justifying the need of its integration with other types of measures, so-called hybrid strategy. Then it's also good to have a critical view on EBA, despite their immense benefits, but we also need to see how EBA solutions and different typology of green areas in cities can contribute to potential negative effects at the societal level, such as green gentrification. Then, to finish with two positive aspects, we understand that there might be EBAs might have a potential higher flexibility regarding structural changes than art-based measures. And finally, they have a huge potential to deliver more co-benefits than traditional approach to adaptation, such as promoting different ecosystem services, contributing towards climate change mitigation, biodiversity conservation, and enhancement. With the previous information in mind, the SCORE project is working on promoting the smart control of climate resilience in European coastal cities. For that purpose, it gives more attention to climate change impact and adaptation in 10 cities and regions of 7 countries. SCORE project will approach EBA measures with the purpose of contributing to a better knowledge of their socioeconomic costs and benefits when compared to other strategies. For that purpose, the SCORE project will, for example, implement methods such as cost-benefit analysis or multi-criteria analysis, that the two combine expert view with the participation of different stakeholders to evaluate and know more about the costs and benefits and the preferences of different types of alternatives. Plus, SCORE project will monitor climate change impact and adaptation through smart technologies. It will also contribute to the education, training, and dissemination of knowledge to a wide audience about EBAs and other aspects, and will really implement EBA solutions in some of these cities. At the core of these objectives, SCORE follows the Living Lab approach, which allows to integrate different types of stakeholders in the co-creation, monitor, and evaluation of solution with experts. Thank you for your attention. And now, without further delay, I'm pleased to introduce the next speaker, Fokko van der Rot, which will provide us some lessons about the work of EcoShape on the implementation of EBA measures. Thank you for being here today, Fokko. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Luís. I hope you can all hear me. Thank you very much also, SCORE, for inviting me to speak on this interesting webinar. So my presentation is about the lessons learned from the Building with Nature program. Building with nature in this context is focusing on nature-based solutions for water-related infrastructure. I'm not going into the details of the various definitions, but I think in these presentations we can say that ecosystem-based adaptation, nature-based solutions, building with nature are very similar type of approaches. But in this presentation, I focus on what we call building with nature solutions. So a short introduction about myself. My name is Fokko van der Goot. I'm an environmental engineer, and I work now for 16 years for Boskalis. And Boskalis is a Dutch marine contractor. We work globally on all kinds of water-related infrastructure. And since 2016, I'm on behalf of Boskalis, program manager at the EcoShape Foundation. And I will explain a little bit more about EcoShape in a minute. So I have experience in traditional infrastructure and also in, let's say more innovative nature-based solutions, infrastructure developments. So in the conventional traditional infrastructure development, we see that still many, let's say, single-purpose solutions are being implemented. So these single-purpose solutions try to tackle basically one objective, either flood protection or economical development or a navigational objective. And we see that more and more that these single-purpose solutions don't allow for addressing other issues that are at hand. For example, climate change, ecosystem degradation, but also growing cities. And we see more and more that these developments are intervening each other, and that these single-purpose solutions don't allow for addressing these other objectives. So there's a need to change in the way we develop infrastructure to also address other objectives. And an important aspect in this thinking or change in thinking is that we see that everything is connected. So typically in infrastructure we focus on the infrastructure development itself, and after we've designed something, we're going to think about how will this affect the environment, how will this affect the surrounding areas. However, if you take along this environment as a fundamental part of your design development, then you might come to all kinds of other solutions, taking along the ecological conditions, water quality, but also groundwater use, land ownership, the governance, not only the physical aspects, but also ecological and social and economical aspects. So if you make that's an inherent part of your design process, you come to a different way of thinking. So instead of building against nature or building against the environment, you come to a process where you try to incorporate nature as a fundamental part of your infrastructure development. And we see that this is a global trend. So nature-based solutions for the past 10 years or so, you see that that there's a lot of knowledge being developed on this topic. All kinds of guidelines are being published by global institutions like the World Bank, IUCN, UNDP, also the European Union. And these guidelines are all about the process of implementing nature-based solutions. But unfortunately, we realize that implementation is still lacking and upscaling. There are many interesting pilots being done, but actual implementation and upscaling and mainstreaming of this process of these nature-based solutions is remains seriously challenging. And the question is, why is that? Because we all acknowledge the benefits of these nature-based solutions. So from our experience, we see that nature-based solutions are inherently different from traditional engineering solutions. Nature-based solutions are inherently dynamic, whereas most infrastructure developments and engineering solutions are very static. So that requires a different way of thinking. Nature-based solutions are always multifunctional, so they always tackle multiple objectives. They're innovative, they're new for dealing with issues and also with water issues. And they're always local and context specific. And of course, this also applies to traditional engineering solutions, but nature-based solutions requires fundamental understanding of the physical system, ecological system, and socio-economic system. So that it requires a lot of data. It requires a lot of knowledge on the situation where you want to apply your engineering solutions. So it really, you really need to think and act and interact in a different way than we are used to. So that inspired a group of organizations in the Netherlands to collaborate and develop knowledge on these nature-based solutions for water-related infrastructure. In 2008, the EcoShape Foundation was founded. The initiators, Boskalis and Van Noord, two main contractors in the Netherlands, brought together knowledge institutes, consultants, NGOs, universities, also government organizations, to set up a public-private knowledge development program with the aim to implement building nature or nature-based solutions and learn from these and try to upscale these solutions to other locations. So how did we start? Let's say I mentioned 2008. We started with this public knowledge program as an alternative for traditional hydraulic infrastructure development. And I think one of the primary objectives was that we found between those companies that were also competitors, but we found a shared ambition to test and implement the concepts in practice, combine these physical pilots with fundamental knowledge developments. And so we work together with universities, with PhDs to develop fundamental engineering rules for these nature-based solutions. We translated all this knowledge into practical guidelines so others can use it. These are all made publicly available. We set up a very large collaborative network with all kinds of experts that we can use for our projects. And we always had the aim to upskill and mainstream the knowledge to other projects in other countries. So for this presentation, I would like to provide a few examples of the projects we've executed. And I don't want to dive into the details of the project because it's very local context specific. But I want to highlight some of the enablers we've been able to address in these nature-based solutions that can be used for upscaling and replication elsewhere. So our project portfolio, we have been able to execute knowledge programs with a total value of approximately 60 million euros, focusing on nature-based flood defenses, resilient cities, sustainable port development, and ecosystem restoration. And often it's a combination of these 4 themes. And for this project, I want to dive into 3 examples. But later after this presentation, I give you the link to our website where you can find information about all these projects. So let's first start with the reinforcement of the Houtripdijk. The Houtripdijk is a dike, a 20-kilometer dike located in the middle of the Netherlands, in a freshwater lake, actually splitting 2 lakes apart, the Lake Marke and the Lake IJssel. And this dike, which you see on the original situation on the right-hand side, was a very traditional dike with a road on it. It's a very important road for connecting the east with the west of the Netherlands. And the dike also had a water safety function, and the dike was considered unsafe and had to be reinforced. And typically, you would reinforce the dike in the same way as it has been constructed originally. So you remove the dike and build it up with more rock, higher, more asphalt, very static structure. And as you can see in the satellite picture, the Lake Marke has a very different color than the Lake IJssel, and that's because the Houtripdijk has closed off that lake completely from fresh water intake. So it's a very turbid lake, very degraded ecosystem, mainly because of all the hard structures that are surrounded this lake. So there are very few soft, let's say, borders between land and water. So the government thought this was also an opportunity to change that this type of ecosystem and try to change the to upgrade the ecosystem in Lake Marker. However, this was never a nature-based solution was never done in this type of environment. We have a lot of experience with building with sand in the Netherlands, but never in a in lake environment. So together with the government, we with the High Water Protection Board, the Flood Protection Board of the government, together with EcoShape, we designed a pilot. A small stretch along the dike was dedicated for a physical pilot with PhD research, very intensive monitoring campaigns for 4 years, and we had regular meetings on the pilot together with the government to see how this nature-based solution was developing over time during storms, and we gained a lot of confidence together with the government about how this nature-based solutions could work in this environment. We tested all kinds of different vegetation, different types of sands combined with clay. Every time a big storm was coming, we did an intensive monitoring campaign beforehand and afterwards. So we really learned about how this nature-based solution would function in under extreme conditions. I'm not going to dive into all the monitoring details, but I think the main principle here is that collaborating with the government and knowledge institutes, contractors and consultants, we all gained a lot of confidence that this solution could work. And in the meantime, the government was able to translate and used all this data for a market tender to replicate and upscale this concept for the entire dike, for the entire 20 kilometers of the dike, which was a normal market procedure. This resulted in an upscaling of the concept that was tested in a very small pilot that costed maybe 3 to 4 million euros, and in the end, that resulted in a market project of, if I remember correctly, between 70 and 80 million euros, which was executed and is has been finalized. So in this case, a small-scale pilot, together with all the parties involved, really helped gain confidence in an innovative solution, and all the data collected at this pilot was used to upscale and replicate along the dike. Another example is the Hondsbosse Sea Defense, which is located along the north coast of the North Sea coast of the Netherlands. This was the old situation. Again, quite a traditional seawall defense, which was one of the few locations in the Netherlands where a dike was located along the North Sea, whereas most of the North Sea coast is covered with sand. This was the last stretch of hard static infrastructure, which was considered one of the weakest links in the Dutch coastal defense. And here on the right-hand side, you see an aerial view. On the bottom side, on the south side, you see the dune area with the beach, which is the typical ecosystem and flood protection we have in the Netherlands. And here on the north side, you see the dike with the hinterland, which was considered a very weak link in our coastal defense. So the Dutch government wants to reinforce this, had to reinforce this dike, and wants to do this in an innovative building with nature way. However, it wasn't really sure how to do this at such a large scale. So instead of figuring out and taking all the responsibility and risk on their own plate, they developed a tender with actually a very innovative way of trying to initiate innovative solutions for this problem. So usually with an infrastructure contract or an infrastructure tender, the bidder with the lowest price will typically win a project. But in this case, the Dutch government added all kinds of what we call quality values to the contract. So instead of, besides the technical quality and the price, the government also valued the bids on how recreation was included in the contract, how nature was included in the contract, how the maintenance of the nature-based solutions was done, and also the nuisance for the surrounding stakeholders were taken into account. And this resulted in a what we call a fictive bid price. So the government was so, for example, if you the contractor provides a bid of 140 million euros for the total scope of this project, you are able to get a fictional discount on your bid if you had included nature, recreation, and other benefits into your solution. And that resulted in a fictional discount on your bid. So you were able to have, for example, a high bid price, but with a high quality, you were still able to win this contract. So it was an incentive for contractors, for the market, to come up with innovative solutions, with innovative nature-based solutions, to develop this, to construct this contract, to design this contract, to construct it, but also to maintain it for the coming 20 years. So it was a complete package for the market to develop. So the contractor is responsible for the 20 years of maintenance of this project. So that has resulted in a nature-based solutions. So the dike was completely replaced by a sandy foreshore with the dune development. You can still see here in the aerial picture the original dike, which is still in place, but the safety, flood protection has completely been taken over by a dune area and a sandy foreshore, including all kinds of added nature values. So this is what the area looks like now. It's a beautiful area. It's a lot of biodiversity, but it's most importantly, it has a very resilient flood protection function. So a great way of shifting risks and responsibilities from the governments to a market company. So these were two examples from the Netherlands. I want to move over to Indonesia. Maybe not so relevant mangrove development for most of the organizations that are in this webinar, but I think some of the lessons learned from this project can be very relevant for all of us. So along the north coast of Java, Java is facing many challenges. For example, a lot of coastal erosion as a result of the removal of mangroves. So mangroves are a natural feature that is able to reduce wave energy and also to collect and hold fine sediments. So by removing the mangroves for example, aquaculture development, a lot of coastal erosion problems occur along this stretch of coast. And also in the Mak, where we have been executed the project for 7 years, where the coast has been reduced for 3 to 4 kilometers over the course of 15 years or so. So together with the communities, we've been selected all kinds of aquaculture measures. We've been engaging with over 300 farmers in the area that do shrimp farming and fish farming. And we've been setting up coastal field schools together with these farmers to train them and engage with them how to make their traditional aquaculture system more sustainable by introducing mangroves, restoring mangrove greenbelts, and replacing, let's say, intensive aquaculture systems to more biodegradable and bio-friendly aquaculture practices. So it's a very social project with a lot of stakeholder engagement, a lot of work together with communities, and that has resulted to quite some interesting results. So here you see one of the some of the measures we've been able to implement. We've been able to restore the mangrove greenbelts along the coast by turning degraded fish ponds into back into mangroves. we've been able to introduce mangroves into the aquaculture systems by showing that if you give up some of your land and give it back to mangroves, the system will improve, the water quality will improve, the areas for fish and shrimps will improve, and actually by giving up some of your land for mangroves, it will increase the product. It has increased the productivity with 200 to 300% and increase their income with the same value. So it costs us a lot of convincing work. So we've been training them for over 2 years in coastal field schools with all kinds of pilots, and really showing that it works, trying to convince the farmers that this is the way forward for their land, and that has in the end resulted that over 300 farmers implemented these type of measures in this landscape. I think the most important enabler for this project was the multidisciplinary collaboration. To me, one of the most important lessons for implementing nature-based solutions is collaboration. I come from a very technical background from the contractor world, and I have learned that we can tackle most of the engineering questions quite easily, also in combination with let's say integrating ecology and engineering. However, the only way you get these innovations implemented is through collaboration with local stakeholders, with universities, with governments, really trying to understand each other's position, each other's ambition, and really to find common ground where you can work effectively together on the ground to get these measures implemented. It sometimes requires a lot of effort beforehand in the preparation time, but eventually it will pay off. And I believe that is the only way forward for getting nature-based solutions implemented on the ground. So some of the lessons learned from EcoShape, I think they can be captured in what we call the enablers for implementing building with nature. These relate to six topics or 6 themes. It's the techniques, so it's a technology and a system knowledge, which is essential for understanding how your system works, which is the basis of each nature-based solutions. Like I said, multi-stakeholder approach, engage with all the stakeholders that are that have a certain stake in the landscape. Management, monitoring, and maintenance. Institutional embedding is a very important aspect. The business case. So how do you get the added benefits valued in your business case, and capacity building, all very essential for building with nature implementation. So I've listed here some of the things I've mentioned in my presentations. Pilots. We have learned from within the EcoShape Foundation that pilot is an essential step in implementing nature-based solutions. It really gives you a place where you can go to, where you can show people what nature-based solutions look like. And my experience is you can talk about it in presentations, but when you bring people to a site, to a nature-based solutions, people get inspired. It really opens their eyes. And it really helps in convincing people that these type of solutions are the way forward. And it gives you a great place to learn by doing it. Translate co-benefits into revenue streams. This is a very important topic that we need to start valuing the added benefits of these type of infrastructure developments for biodiversity, for food, for recreation. These need to be included into the revenue streams of these of financing these type of solutions. Ensuring the long-term benefits requires support from the government. This seems very normal for perhaps most countries that we work in, but in particular in development countries, this is a great barrier. For example, having budget for long-term monitoring, for maintenance of your nature-based solutions. This is in most countries not. There's no, institutional setting for this this type of work. Adaptive management that is required to fit the dynamic character of nature-based solutions. Most of the the way we manage projects is it's a very linear way. So we design something, we construct something, and we maintain it, and there's no structure in place to adapt your design based on the findings of your monitoring along the way. So this is a different way of project implementation and requires also a different way of contracting, for example, your project. Long-term monitoring is required to facilitate maintenance. Nature-based solutions require a different way of maintenance, where hard structures are often, once they're constructed, they are in place for a long time and only need to be maintained in based on a one-off event. For example, after an extreme condition, extreme event, they need to be maintained. However, nature-based solutions, sometimes require a different way of maintenance, and with all the contracting and financing differences in contracting and financing connected to it. And like I mentioned, active community engagements and stakeholder engagements from the very beginning of a project development is essential for getting ownership of local stakeholders, and getting them on board from a very early phase of project development is key for implementing these nature-based solutions. And with that, I would like to conclude. For more information, please refer to our websites. There's all kinds of guidelines and instruction videos on nature-based solutions and building with nature, information on our pilots and projects. And with this, I would like to, I will stop sharing my screen. And I see Luís is...
Sorry, I wanted to clap, but I raised my hand. Sorry. Congratulations. I have a couple of questions, but I think in the audience, Maeva now has the floor. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you very much, both of you, for your presentation, and we're perfectly on schedule. Even a bit, we even finished a bit earlier for the presentation, so we have more time for questions. So I invite all of you just to write down your questions in the Q&A tab that you see. If you have any issues, you can also write down in the chat, but the Q&A will be a bit easier to manage for us. So I see there is already a question, so we'll take some question from the audience, and then maybe Luís, after you can also ask yours. So the first one is, Fokko, could you explain a little bit the two pictures of the different beaches, building against nature versus building with nature? I did not fully understand the innovative picture. Thank you.
Yeah.
I see that apparently you answered it. He replied in a comment, but if you can maybe give a bit more explanation.
Yeah. Okay. So I think maybe I just quickly share my presentation again. I think it was these two pictures. I think they were also presented earlier in the presentation about the difference between building against nature and building with nature. So indeed, I explained this project a little bit more. I think the main difference here is that on the left-hand side, the static structure, we have a lot of experience with designing dikes, designing hard structures, and we know the limitations, but we have experience with these limitations. So all over the world, people, that's my experience at least, people tend to choose for the left solution because they know how it functions. They know the limitations and they know how to construct it, and we know how to design it. Whereas on the right-hand side, the sandy foreshore has for many people all kinds of uncertainties that requires a different way of thinking and a different way of maintaining these type of flood protection structures. In the Netherlands, we have quite a lot of experience with it, but I experienced it many places in the world. People find it too uncertain to use a soft solution for flood protection because during extreme conditions, it is sometimes uncertain how these soft solutions will behave. However, on the other side, in this changing and environment with climate change, the future is also rather uncertain. So sea level rise and extreme events, we know they will change. We know the sea level is rising. We know that extreme events become more extreme. However, how extreme we don't know. And in that sense, it's much easier to choose for the right solution because these are much easier to adapt and amend. So if we, in 10, 20 years time, we gain more insights in how these extreme events will develop, we can either add more sense or not, but we can easily amend these solutions. Where on the left-hand side, this hard structure, if we design these based on the current knowledge on the extreme events, we may underestimate how the future will be in 20, 30 years time. And if we need to change this structure again, then we need to do a lot more investments in upgrading these hard structures compared to upgrading the soft solution on the right-hand side. I hope that clarifies.
Thank you. I think you can actually keep the slide up because there are several questions specifically for this one project. So we have one question that's actually three questions in one, which is about the same project. How was the quality value derived? How was the use for surrounding stakeholders defined and quantified? And how was the value for nature or recreation compiled?
All very good questions.
Can also do it one by one if it's easier.
It's I must admit that I was not part of this contract execution, so I don't know all the details. But first, about the stakeholder question. Like I said, this was not a linear tender process, so it was what we call a two-phased process. So first, contractors were invited by the government to discuss potential solutions. So there was an interaction and almost a collaboration between contractors, market parties, and the government during the tender process to explore innovative solutions that would benefit, of course, the flood protection, but also benefit nature and recreation. And this was done in consultation with all kinds of stakeholders. So in that process already, there was a lot of interaction with stakeholders, and the market parties, the contractors, were involved in that process. And after phase one, all the contractors were able to update their first proposal based on all these stakeholder engagement sessions and interaction with the government. And based on that second proposal, a contractor was selected, or I think two contractors were selected to go into the next phase to further detail these innovative solutions. So it was more an iterative process with market parties, governments, and stakeholders to come to the right solution. And in the end, one contractor was selected based on their final bid. So that's about the stakeholder process. I think with regards to the valuation of all these criteria, I don't know all the details, but I know that there were a detailed criteria pre-selected, predefined, based on how your design and how your proposal would be evaluated for each of these elements. For example, with regards to nature, I know that long-term monitoring was part of the valuation. So it's not only that you design and promise something, but it also resulted in that this had to be proven after the project how this nature was going to develop. And actually, EcoShape was involved in all the post-project monitoring and valuation of all the, let's say, the nature benefits and biodiversity benefits that were beforehand designed, so to speak. So that's the second question. What was the third question?
I think that was the first one. It was how was the quality value derived? But I believe you answered it.
Yeah, yeah. So I don't know the exact details, but I know for sure that there was like all kinds of sub criteria defined beforehand on, so the contractors knew on what kind of criteria they would be valued.
Okay, great. We're also having some very nice comments about the work and saying that it's very impressive and very inspiring. So it's a very, very interesting project. So we have another question. This one is, so I'll say this one again because this is also about the same project. So Rochelle, this is actually from you. How was the quality value? No, sorry, this is, yeah, regarding the contract model used in this project, has this been used again in the Netherlands or adopted beyond the Netherlands?
Sorry, can you repeat the question again?
Absolutely. The contract model that was used in this project,
Yeah.
has this been used again in the Netherlands or outside of it?
Yeah, actually,
yeah.
Yeah, actually, it's in the Netherlands. This is a standard for certain. I'm not sure if from a certain value or certain complexity, but this is embedded in the institutional setting of the government. It's called MV. Yeah, it's a Dutch abbreviation. So it's like economic environmental best value contract, and it's often used for the more complex contracts, and it's not always focusing on nature. Sometimes the quality value is about safety or about stakeholder engagement or about some managing some risks. So it can be used in all kinds of different ways. And as far as I know, it's a very Dutch thing. So I haven't heard from this type of valuation in other countries, but I think it's a very good tool for the government to not only look at the economical value of a bid, but also to other qualities, and also to manage some risks, to transfer risks from the government to the market, for example, to deal with some kind of uncertainties or other type of risks.
Great, thank you. We have another question. This one is from Luís. Unless you want to say it out loud, I can just read it as you prefer.
Well, thank you. I can say it out loud. Well, just wondering if you've found it in different projects in the sites that you work in, if you found any type of conflicts between different stakeholders, because often stakeholders have different preferences regarding different management options, and some aspects also influence their lives in terms of living and also economic activities, etc.
Yes, thank you. That's a very, very good question. In the Netherlands, I'm not sure how many of you have been to the Netherlands, but we have, of course, our country of water and dikes. So a typical, let's say, the cultural landscape in the Netherlands consists of lowlands and dikes. So it's very flat and straight, and that's what we consider, let's say, our cultural landscape. And many people love that landscape and that wide view. So, for example, in certain dike reinforcement projects, like the Hondsbos reinforcement, and also the Houtripdijk, we changed that landscape from straight lines to dynamic nature. And personally, I think that's much more beautiful. But people who live there often perceive that as a change of this cultural landscape. and often beforehand, when we come with these new solutions of dynamic nature, soft foreshores instead of straight dikes, people tend to do not agree with these type of solutions because they are used to this cultural landscape. So there's often a lot of opposition for these innovative solutions, and that's why these pilots are also very important, and having examples to show that these nature-based solutions are actually providing a great contribution to this cultural landscape. And in most cases, of course, there will also always be people that don't like change. Yeah? There are always people that that do not agree with these interventions. But my experience is that the majority of the people, once they've seen the intervention and they've seen this this nature-based solutions, they are convinced and they love it and they see the benefits of it. Yeah, but you can never convince everybody.
Thank you. So Maeva and Rochelle, I think that we are almost finishing the webinar, so I can start with the closing remarks. First, I'm sure that the audience, which we thank very much for being here today. I'm sure that there are a lot of questions not answered today, so you also can find our emails in this presentation if you want to add additional clarification about something. So I think that the purpose of this webinar was quite amazingly fulfilled. That is to present the SCORE project that is in the first year. It just ended the first year, so we have still 3 more years ahead of us. So we encourage everyone to follow SCORE project either through the website, the YouTube channel where the webinar is going to be included, and other types of channels as well. And so we fulfilled this purpose of presenting SCORE, and our EBAs in the general terms were going to be introduced and worked in this project. And then we were quite pleased with Fokko's presentation of being here, and we thank you a lot for being here because it also provides us a clear example of implementation in the ground and the lessons learned from this process and from EcoShape. So we thank you very much for your time. And finally, I will share you a follow-up. Let me see. Okay. So we share with you this follow-up survey in case you want to fill in through this QR code, and then we also will share it in the chat, the link. But this is a follow-up survey to know more about your opinions about this webinar, and we encourage you to participate in this follow-up survey. And I think that's it from our side. It was a pleasure for being here, also together with Maeva and Rochelle and the organization of this event. And on behalf of us and the entire SCORE consortium, we salute you and wish you a very nice day, and keep on thinking in nature-based solution terms. And thank you very much for being here.
Thanks so much, everyone. Enjoy your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining.